It's induction season. Again, we get 2 every year. The first one is in the summertime, for obvious reasons, summer vacation, and the second one is closer to the holidays. So usually from October to December, you see a rise in inductions and consequently a rise in cesareans. So what is happening right now inside of the mainstream mommy groups, if you are not aware, is that a lot of moms are asking about induction. And if you've also been in the mommy groups, you might be noticing a pattern where they're not even 40 weeks yet. So what are these OBs doing? Okay, so here's BS reason number 1. They say that it's safer to go to 39 weeks than it is to go to 40 weeks, and it reduces the risk of C-section. First of all, this is based off of a trial called the ARRIVE trial, and it's a really flawed study. And the idea was they basically took a sample of moms who were either going for an elective induction at 39 weeks versus when they went at 41 weeks. So they were already choosing to be in this study and already choosing induction. So they're not choosing a physiological birth. The ARRIVE trial, of course, is what a lot of moms now cite when they're in the mommy shaming groups and say, well, it's better for your baby to go to 39 weeks than it is 40 weeks, and you're less likely to have a C-section. Wrong, 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 wrong. So the next one, to avoid a big baby. No, 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 no. Your chances of having a truly big baby that your body cannot birth is very, very slim. Maria LeMay says there's 2 kinds of pelvises. The 2 kinds are ample, and you could fit a pony through there, honey. So the chances of you having a baby that is too big for your body to birth are very, very slim to none. If you're worried about tearing, again, the idea with tearing is you're probably only going to get a surface tear, if anything at all. If you're doing a physiological birth, you're going to be pushing when your body is telling you and panting when your body is telling you. You're more likely to tear if you have an epidural than if you're having a physiological birth and you're upright and you're doing your own thing and nobody is pulling on your baby and nobody is trying to vacuum your baby out and nobody has you on your back. That is what causes 90% of the tearing, is pushing moms on their back, and also episiotomy. These OBs used to think that our vaginas were just not big enough to birth a baby, and so they'd cut us. Well, what happens when you cut a piece of fabric and then tear it? Well, you're going to get more of a tear, right? So don't worry about tearing. You'll probably get like barely anything, if that. And this, I'm just throwing this out there, but my friend Michelle Short, she has been on 2 live streams already, and she was talking about how she had a 10-pound baby at home and no tears. Now, you may be thinking that Michelle is like some sort of Amazon woman, and she's not. She's very tiny, just like me, and she birthed a 10-pound baby at home, no problems. So do not let your OB scare you into having an induction for a big baby. The other thing is that you can't actually guess what the estimated weight is of a baby. They could be off by as much as 5 pounds in either direction. So consider that for a second. You go and you get induced, and then you end up with a C-section anyway. And then from all of that work, you find out your baby's only 6 pounds. How are you going to feel about that? Are you going to be like, oh, that was totally worth it, even though my baby is tiny? No, I don't think so. The next one, big bullshit reason. You're approaching 40 weeks. Nothing has been happening yet. So you are 2 centimeters, and we'll break your water, or we can just induce you next week. Is that giving you any options? No. What if your cervix is completely closed? That doesn't mean anything either. If your cervix is completely closed, that just means you might not be feeling ready to have a baby. Your body might not be ready. Your baby might not be ready. Or you might have been 3 or 4 centimeters before your care provider started talking about induction and possibly you having an episiotomy and possibly you're having a big baby, and you're basically sucking that baby back up and your cervix is going nope, 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 and closing up. Or your care provider is poking around in there and it's not very comfortable. So you went from a 1 and then you closed up again because your cervix is irritated. Your cervix is not a crystal ball. So let's stop treating it like a crystal ball and recognize that you do not have to have a cervix check ever, not even in labor. It tells you absolutely nothing. And if you're not showing any signs of going into labor anytime soon, that doesn't mean your body's broken. That means your care provider is incredibly impatient, doesn't understand physiological birth, and you might want to hire a midwife, or at the very least, just say, no, thank you. No, thank you. I'm just gonna wait for my body because I trust my body. I trust my instincts. Everything's good. So those are the biggest BS reasons why your OB may be pushing an induction, especially at this time of year. What's the real reason? Profit, convenience, liability issues, mistrust of your bodies, and also maybe they just don't understand physiology. They've been taught a very pathological way of dealing with your body. In fact, I was reading inside of Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, and Jenny and I have been diving into this book when we have our Take Charge of Birth program classes. And Martin Luther, the guy that created the Protestants and everything, said basically that our bodies are defective and we are supposed to just birth and birth and birth until we basically pass out. And I think Aristotle is another one that's on my list. And he also said that we were basically inferior versions of men. So patriarchy has been going back a long time trying to tell you that your body is broken, and it's not true. And when OBs decided to take over maternity care and push the midwives out, they made it seem like birth was way more complicated than it really was. And then they made it more complicated with the forceps and everything. Jenny says lots of people also talk about their baby being big when it's only 8 pounds. Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I had an almost 8-pounder. They're not really that big, because if they were, Michaela would not have shot out into the water like a torpedo. And I had very little tearing. It was just a little graze. And honestly, if you have rough sex, you'd probably get the same little surface tears. It was nothing, absolutely nothing. I barely felt it. I didn't even know until after the midwife checked, and she said, yeah, you had this very small tear. But I mean, Michaela shot out like a torpedo, like 10 minutes from my waters breaking, like releasing in the pool, and all of a sudden there's the head and there's the baby and there's the shoulders, out she comes. So I'm not surprised. But again, tearing really wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't feel it. I healed really quickly. I didn't really have more than 1 stitch, and I was in the water and it was awesome. I would totally do that birth over again, just with a different partner. So the next thing that I wanted to talk is about the misconceptions of planning an induction, because your care provider may say things to you that are going to make you question whether it's really that big of a deal. So they might say things like, oh, well, you know, it's just like going into regular labor, except that we'll just start it for you. No, 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 no. I cannot stress this enough. An induced labor is a medicalized practice. It is telling your body to do something before it is ready. It is telling your baby to be born before they are ready, before the protein in their lungs has formed, before they are actually packing on enough weight that they could survive on the outside without any problems. This also interferes with breastfeeding. This interferes with bonding. This interferes with their nervous system and how they are able to sleep. It just affects everything. If your baby's not ready, why would you force them out? Would you go into the oven and say, well, you know, these cookies are still kind of mushy. I think there's still some raw egg, but you know, I'm really, really hungry, so I'm just going to pull them out of the oven and I'm going to eat them. Well, you know, you could, and you're going to get a huge stomach ache if you do, because it's not like the regular cookie dough stuff that you put in the cookie dough ice cream. This is like actual raw egg. You don't want that. Or like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to force your baby before they're ready unless there is a medical reason to. Such as with Jenny, I mean, she had preeclampsia, so that is a medical reason for an induction. A big baby is not a medical reason for an induction. Gestational diabetes that is diet controlled, that you are still feeling fine, that the baby is still doing okay, is not a reason for an induction that is medicalized. Going past 41 weeks is not a reason for induction. So, to recap, it's not the same thing. Induction for versus a physiological birth is a completely different animal. Induction is going to be harder on your body. It's going to be harder on your baby. There's a more likelihood of complications from it. You're going to likely have more medicalized experience, whereas they're doing electronic fetal monitoring, they're doing vaginal exams because they want to monitor your progress. They are basically putting you on a time limit on how long that you are allowed to labor for, because when you have an induction, they also tend to break your waters. When they do that, baby can't get into an optimal position, baby can get stuck. You're not going to be as comfortable because you don't have a nice cushion on your cervix anymore. You have a bowling ball, and the uterus is just contracting over and over and over and over and over again, trying to shake the baby out like a ketchup bottle. Like, you know, when you're trying to shake a ketchup bottle and get that out, that's basically what they're doing. It's not the physiological process that your body goes through. And you may have caught some of the previous live streams where I talk about the physiological birth process as well. It's absolutely fascinating when you understand how your body actually works. The next thing is the idea that breaking your waters somehow induces labor. No, it does not. It might trigger contractions, might. If your baby's not ready, you might just end up having to use Pitocin, because the idea behind breaking your waters was, oh, well, the baby will push their head on the cervix and that will start the process to get things going. We now know that your cervix is not opening the way that we think it does. In fact, it's the fact that your uterus is pulling muscles upwards to create a very, very strong fundus, which is the muscle at the top of your uterus that pushes the baby down. So you want to build up that muscle, and that's what effacement is. It thins out your cervix because your uterus is pulling those muscles up. It is not just some magical process where somehow the cervix thins out and then opens up because the baby is pushing on it. It's not that way at all. So keeping your waters intact is probably going to serve you better, because all throughout your labor, when it gets going, you're going to have that cushion. I love having my waters intact. I love it so much because even though I don't have consistent contractions, they're so much easier. And then at the end, yes, there's a lot of pressure before that bag bursts, but once it bursts, baby's already on their way out. The next thing that's a misconception about induction is that if your care provider chooses a certain way that you need to be induced, that you don't have any other options. You have to choose that one. So if they say, so we're going to induce you with oxytocin, but you don't want to be induced with oxytocin, you can say no. You can say, actually, I'd prefer the Foley ball, or I'd prefer Cervidil first, or I would prefer natural methods. And I'm just going to get into that in just a second about the natural methods, because there's a misconception there too. But the truth is that if you are considering induction, possibly because you have circumstances where it would probably be better for you, either mentally or emotionally or physically, for you to have your baby earlier, then you can choose a method that you feel is right for you. And then if you feel that things can change, that you want to try Pitocin, you can do that. Or if you choose to have a cesarean as an elective instead, you can choose that option as well. It's like, if induction doesn't work, I'd like a cesarean. I teach this again to my clients inside the Take Charge of Birth program, especially for VBAC moms and especially for moms that have had complications. In fact, Jenny has her own backup plan in what she wants for a gentle cesarean in the event that they say that she needs to induce. And she'll be like, I'm not inducing again. However, I would like to do this. So you have options always around whether or not you induce and what kind of induction you have. Finally, the last one, biggest misconception, that you can induce labor naturally. No, you can't induce labor naturally, because first of all, the whole idea of a natural labor is one that is not induced. Now, there's a lot of controversy around this, because yes, there are some methods that are natural that do work. However, you are still forcing your body to do something that it wasn't already planning to do. And if you are pushing your body to do these things and you were already going to go into labor anyway, you may be rushing the physiological process so that it might be less comfortable, especially if you do this one. If you have castor oil, you're going to have a bad time, okay? It's not a fun way to induce. Sex would probably be better. And again, nothing's going to get that baby out unless they are ready to come. The best way is get your oxytocin flowing. Get it flowing. And I'll be talking more about that inside of the Empowered Birth workshops. So now, I also told you that I was going to tell you some ways to say no to an induction, to avoid an induction. So one of the key things is to hire a care provider who is not induction happy. This can be a midwife. This can also be an OB who is more natural minded, but someone who is not going to look at you when you hit 39 weeks and say, okay, so, if you want, we can induce you early and you'll have a smaller baby and you'll be able to meet your baby early. Don't you want to meet your baby early? And here's this study that says that you're not likely to have a higher chance of C-section. Well, higher chance compared to what, first of all? So definitely make sure you're not hiring a care provider who is induction happy. There's an excellent book by Rachel Reed. It's called Why Induction Matters. And this book is like the big guidebook that I use when I'm showing to my clients about induction. Another good one is, I think it's by Sarah Buckley, and she also is excellent for understanding induction. There are many podcasts, there are blogs. Evidence-Based Birth has a bunch of articles on induction as well. So just learn all of the information that you possibly can. And inside of the Empowered Birth workshops and inside my Take Charge of Birth program, I also teach a lot on induction. It's one of my passions that I just love to tell the facts and debunk the myths around induction. And now that I have Instagram at Empowering Moms Birth, you can actually go back and check out my posts, and you'll find a series of posts that I did back in December called the 25 Days to Question Your Induction. So you'll be able to find them very easily. So another thing that you can do, besides doing your research and hiring the right care provider, is to basically learn and release your fears around saying no thank you. Start setting those boundaries now. Start learning your rights now. Start understanding that you are the decision maker, and that even if your care provider is pushing induction, you can say no thank you. It's as simple as that. They can say, so we scheduled your induction for 41 weeks, and you can say, that's nice, cancel it. Or you can choose not to show up, and they'll be like, where are you? And it's like, well, I said I didn't want this, and you scheduled it, and I'm not coming in. They can't force you to come in and have an induction. They really can't. It is your decision. It is your right to informed consent. Now, sometimes they may threaten you with CPS, Child Protective Services. This is an unfortunate thing that happens, It happens more often with people of lower socioeconomic status or people of color, any visible minorities, sometimes even gender discrimination. It's a very unfortunate thing, and it's illegal at AF, okay? It's illegal, and yet they are doing it because they feel that the threat is going to get you to just agree, and you may not know your rights. So learn your rights inside and out so that if they do try to do that, you can say, I am well within my rights to decline this induction. I do not have to do it. I am not putting my baby in any danger, and it is my choice. Plain and simple. And then go get a new care provider, because obviously any care provider who is threatening you with CPS is not on your side. They are basically just looking to get you in and get you out as fast as possible. And they're really looking at their bottom line and not at what's best for you and your baby. This is also a problem with insurance companies. And if we can get enough people to start writing into insurance companies and saying, hey, here's what the data actually says on stillbirth rates versus cesareans, the insurance companies are going to look at it and be like, well, we don't want to pay for all these unnecessary C-sections. That's way more money than allowing for a physiological process to actually take place. But again, we have so many misconceptions out there about due dates and about big babies and about all the horrible things that can possibly go wrong in childbirth. I love you. Stay safe. Stay out of the heat if you can manage it. Get some AC, get some water, cool off, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.